Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to a city that's seen empires rise and fall, civilizations clash and blend together, a city that shows us how resilient and ambitious people can be. We're diving deep into the story of Istanbul.
Istanbul's history isn't just a straight line.
Right.
It's more like a tapestry, made of threads from the Greeks, Romans, Byzantines, and Ottomans, all woven together. On a location that's so strategically important, it's been a prize, a battleground, and a cultural melting pot for thousands of years.
You got that right. We've got some amazing sources to help us on this journey. Historical accounts, maps, even insights from scholars who spent their lives trying to uncover Istanbul's secrets.
It's going to be fascinating.
So ready to go from humble beginnings to a huge, awe-inspiring city.
Absolutely. Let's start with the city's origin story. Around 700 BCE, Greek settlers from Megara, guided by the Delphic oracle, they founded a settlement. They called it Byzantium.
Now, the Delphic oracle, wasn't she known for being a little, mysterious, telling them to build opposite the blind?
Yeah.
Sounds like a riddle to me.
It does, doesn't it? It's a story that really shows how smart they were about Byzantium's location. The settlers, when they saw the spot, they probably thought, anyone who missed this must have been blind.
I could see that. Imagine sailing into that natural harbor, the Golden Horn, with the Bosphorus Strait right there, connecting Europe and Asia. Not just a good spot, the best spot. No wonder it attracted empires and merchants.
Precisely. Whoever controlled the only sea route in and out of the Black Sea controlled a lot. Byzantium became a gateway for trade and a strategic link between continents.
But that prime location, it also meant they were always a target, right? Persians, Athenians, Spartans. Byzantium had to be really clever to survive and stay independent.
You're absolutely right. Imagine playing a game of Risk, but for centuries, constantly adapting, maneuvering to stay ahead. Byzantium couldn't afford to just sit back. Diplomacy, alliances, even surrendering sometimes. They used it all to survive.
Talk about being on edge all the
Yeah.
time. But all those empires coming and going, you'd think that would have stopped Byzantium from growing.
Well, it definitely wasn't easy, but it also meant Byzantium was exposed to a ton of different cultures and ideas. This early mix of influences, it really shaped the city's identity later on.
Makes sense. Dealing with all those different cultures would force you to adapt. And that would make you more resilient, I guess.
Exactly. It set the stage for the cosmopolitan city it would become. But before we get too far ahead, let's go back to the early 4th century CE. That's when a Roman emperor named Constantine came along.
Now, this is where things get really interesting. Constantine decided to make a new Rome at Byzantium. He renamed it Constantinople. And he wasn't just changing a name, he was making a point. What do you think was behind this grand vision?
Constantine was a smart strategist. He knew the Roman Empire's power was shifting east. Constantinople, with its location and growing economy, was the perfect place for him. It was a base to show his power and manage a huge empire. And let's be honest, he was an emperor who liked things to be grand.
So it was a power move, but also like recognizing the world was changing. And the city's population just exploded. It reached almost 1 million by 500 CE. Bigger than any city in Western Europe then. Constantinople was clearly booming.
It became a hub for everyone. Merchants, scholars, artisans. The streets would have been full of different languages, a mix of cultures, everyone drawn to the opportunities there.
But with a city growing that fast, you need serious protection.
Right.
Which brings us to the Theodosian walls, one of the most impressive things built in the ancient world.
Yes. These weren't just walls. They were a 3-tiered defense system, built in the 5th century to make Constantinople basically impossible to conquer. Moats, ramparts, watchtowers. It's no wonder they held off invaders like the Huns and kept the city safe for centuries.
I bet those walls were terrifying to anyone trying to attack. But they also had another trick up their sleeve, didn't they? Greek fire.
Greek fire. It was a secret weapon, closely guarded by the Byzantines. A liquid fire that could be sprayed at enemy ships.
Wow.
Imagine the chaos, the terror, like a medieval napalm.
Incredible. Walls, secret weapons. Constantinople was like a fortress, built to survive anything. And don't forget, all this was happening while the Western Roman Empire was falling apart. Constantinople stood strong.
That's right. And a lot of its strength came from how successful its economy was. Constantinople wasn't just a military stronghold, it was a center of trade.
Right. Silks and spices from the Arabs, furs and amber from Russia, tin and wool from Western Europe. It was the ultimate trading crossroads. And the emperors knew how to make money from it. Tell me about that 10% trade tax.
Genius, right? Every merchant, coming or going, paid 10% on their goods. It gave them a ton of money to fund the city's defenses, infrastructure, and of course the emperor's luxurious lifestyle.
Pretty smart. And all those merchants from different parts of the world, it must have made Constantinople a really diverse city.
Absolutely, a true melting pot of cultures, religions, and ideas. And that mix would shape its character for centuries. It was a product of its time, but also, in a way, ahead of its time, don't you think?
I totally agree. It's a really fascinating contradiction. But even the strongest empires can fall. And for Constantinople, that fall came in 1453 at the hands of the Ottoman Turks, a major turning point in history. It marked the end of the Byzantine Empire and the beginning of the Ottoman Empire.
It was a dramatic event. Sieges, cannons, a last stand. It's captured the imagination of historians for centuries. Even the Theodosian walls, as strong as they were, couldn't stop the Ottoman military.
And I heard they had a secret weapon of their own, a Hungarian engineer named Urban. He helped them build these huge cannons, bigger than anything the Byzantines had ever seen. Can you imagine being in the city, hearing those cannons, knowing the walls were coming down? Must have been terrifying.
A siege unlike any other. The Ottomans, led by Sultan Mehmed II, they were determined. And those cannons, some of them absolutely massive, played a key role in their victory.
And what about the Byzantine defenders? They weren't just going to give up.
Oh, they fought bravely. Led by a Genoese mercenary, Giovanni Giustiniani, they held the Ottomans off for weeks. But there were just too many Ottomans, and they had better weapons. And during the final assault, Giustiniani was badly injured. Some historians think that him not being there contributed to the city falling.
It's like something out of a movie, a heroic last stand. It reminds you of the human stories within these big historical events. What happened to the people of the city once the Ottomans broke through the walls?
The city was looted. Many people were killed or enslaved. The last Byzantine emperor, Constantine XI, he's believed to have died fighting in that final assault. They never found his body. A sad end to an era.
A stark reminder of what war costs and how fragile even the strongest empires are. But even though Constantinople fell, the city lived on, reborn as Istanbul, the capital of the Ottoman Empire.
And that's where we'll pick up the story next time.
Can't wait to hear it. We've covered a lot. From humble beginnings to a dramatic fall. What stands out to you so far?
The resilience, I think. How the city adapted and thrived despite constant challenges, sieges, changing empires, cultural upheavals. Constantinople and then Istanbul always found a way to not just survive, but to reinvent itself.
Well said. I'm sure we'll see that theme throughout its history. All right, listeners, join us next time as we explore Istanbul under Ottoman rule. A time of transformation, amazing architecture, and a new chapter in this incredible city's story.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Istanbul's history. Last time, we left off with the Ottomans taking the city in 1453. A big turning point. But Istanbul wasn't done yet.
Not even close. It's hard to imagine a city bouncing back so fast after such a brutal siege. Makes you wonder what life was like in Istanbul under the Ottomans.
Well, it was a time of big change. You see, Mehmed II, the sultan who conquered the city, he actually had a pretty inclusive vision. He wanted Istanbul to be multi-religious, multi-ethnic.
Really? That's surprising. After fighting so hard to conquer it, you'd expect him to, crack down, not open the doors. Why do you think Mehmed chose that approach?
Well, Mehmed was practical, but he was also a visionary. He knew that for Istanbul to truly thrive, he had to use the skills and knowledge of all the different people living there. He invited Jews and Christians to live alongside Muslims. He saw their value in rebuilding the city and getting its economy going again.
It's like a historical example of strength and diversity, way before it became a popular saying. Did this multicultural vision actually last?
To a large extent, yes, especially in those early decades of Ottoman rule. Of course, there were tensions, power struggles, but Istanbul became known as a relatively tolerant city compared to others back then, a place where different faiths and cultures could, to some degree, coexist and even do well.
Now, what about the city itself? The Ottomans were famous for their incredible architecture. Did they just get rid of all the Byzantine stuff and start over?
Not exactly. They definitely left their mark, but they also incorporated and adapted existing structures. The Hagia Sophia is a perfect example. Originally a grand Byzantine cathedral, Mehmed II turned it into a mosque. He added minarets and other Islamic elements to it.
So the building itself became a symbol of this transition, this blending of Byzantine and Ottoman styles. What other amazing buildings did the Ottomans create?
Oh, so many. The Suleimani Mosque complex, built in the 1500s by the architect Sinan, is just stunning. It's a true masterpiece of Ottoman architecture, It rivals even Hagia Sophia in its grandeur and beauty.
I've seen pictures, but I bet seeing it in person is just breathtaking. It sounds like Istanbul became a real showcase of Ottoman power and artistry.
Exactly. It was a deliberate display of their wealth and how advanced they were. Istanbul's skyline was transformed, mosques, palaces, public buildings, all reflecting the empire's growing influence and artistic skill.
And all this was going on while the Ottoman Empire was expanding, right? They were pushing into Europe, North Africa, becoming a major power on the world stage.
That's right. And Istanbul was at the heart of it. Think about it. Istanbul was right on the Bosphorus Strait. It controlled the major trade routes, connecting east and west, north and south. This location made it prosperous and cemented its role as a global hub.
So it was a time of great power and wealth for Istanbul. But as we've seen, empires don't last forever. What happened when the Ottoman Empire started to decline?
Well, the decline was slow. It took centuries, actually. Corruption within the empire, military losses, and rising nationalism among its diverse people. All of it weakened the empire. And as the empire struggled, so did Istanbul.
I imagine the city went through some tough times. Economic hardship, political instability. Was there a lot of social unrest?
There were definitely periods of instability and hardship. The once mighty Ottoman Empire was facing challenges both internally and from rising European powers, and Istanbul, being the heart of the empire, felt those pressures very keenly.
It makes you wonder how all the different people in the city, Muslims, Christians, Jews, dealt with these turbulent times. Did they come together, or were there divisions?
That's a complex question. It really depends on the specific time period. There were times when they cooperated and faced struggles together, but there were also times when tensions flared up, often due to political maneuvering or pressure from outside forces. It reminds us that even in a city known for being relatively tolerant, human history is rarely simple. It's not always about everyone getting along perfectly.
You're right. There's always a struggle for power. And when empires weaken, those cracks can become very visible. So this brings us to the 20th century, a time of massive change for both Istanbul and the world. The Ottoman Empire ended, and the Republic of Turkey was born, a huge turning point for the city.
Absolutely pivotal. World War I, the Ottoman Empire's defeat led to its collapse. And from that collapse, the Republic of Turkey emerged, led by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. This marked a dramatic shift for Istanbul and for Turkey as a whole.
Ataturk was a revolutionary figure. He pushed for modernization and a secular society. But he also made a decision that, at least on the surface, seemed to downplay Istanbul's role. He moved the capital to Ankara.
It was a symbolic way of breaking away from the Ottoman past. Ankara, a city in central Anatolia, represented a fresh start, a focus on Turkish national identity. It was a way to move away from the multi-ethnic complexities that, in some ways, had contributed to the Ottoman Empire's downfall.
It must have been a blow to Istanbul's pride. To lose its status as the capital after centuries at the center of empires?
It was a big change, yes. But Istanbul didn't just disappear. It remained Turkey's largest city, a vibrant center for commerce and culture. And Ataturk's vision for a secular Turkey, it had a huge impact on Istanbul's landscape, especially its Byzantine heritage.
You reminded me of Hagia Sophia. Didn't Ataturk change its status?
He did. In 1934, Ataturk declared that Hagia Sophia, which had been a mosque for centuries, would become a museum, open to people of all faiths. It was a powerful symbol of Turkey's secular identity, and it acknowledged the building's historical significance to many cultures and religions.
I love that. It's like taking all that layered history, Byzantine, Ottoman, and saying, this belongs to everyone. Such an incredible legacy. But I'm guessing Istanbul's story doesn't end there.
Oh, not at all. Istanbul's story is still being written today. It's a megacity now, a sprawling metropolis, dealing with the challenges and opportunities of the 21st century. Its population has skyrocketed to over 15 million people. The skyline is a blend of ancient and modern architecture. Istanbul embodies both the dynamism and the tensions of our modern world.
It's amazing to think that a city that started as a small Greek settlement has become a global powerhouse. What are some of the biggest challenges Istanbul faces today?
Well, rapid growth always brings its own set of problems. Managing infrastructure, providing services for so many people, preserving green spaces in the middle of urban sprawl, these are issues that many big cities face. But they're particularly challenging in Istanbul, given its unique history and location.
And then there's the question of Istanbul's identity, right? How do you balance its rich and layered past, Byzantine, Ottoman, Turkish, with its modern cosmopolitan present?
That is the question Istanbul is constantly wrestling with. It's a city of layers. where different historical and cultural influences coexist, sometimes harmoniously, sometimes not. It's like a microcosm of the challenges and possibilities of a globalized world, where past and present are always interacting.
And where the future is still being shaped. Okay, I'm ready for the final chapter. What insights can we gain from Istanbul's journey into the modern era? So we were talking about Istanbul being this huge city, a megacity, trying to balance its incredible past with modern life. How does a city with so much history even start to modernize?
It's quite a process. Istanbul has really embraced modernity. Look at the infrastructure projects like the Bosphorus bridges and the metro system. It's state of the art.
Those bridges are amazing, connecting Europe and Asia, literally bridging continents. It's like a perfect symbol of Istanbul's role as a crossroads.
You're exactly right. And the economy is booming. Istanbul is a global center for finance, tourism, manufacturing. It attracts investment from all over the world and talented people too. It's really making a name for itself.
But all this growth, all this modernization, it must create some tension too. I mean, trying to fit a 21st century city into a place with thousands of years of history layered underneath. There must be some tough decisions to make.
You've hit on a key point. Istanbul is always trying to balance preserving its heritage with the need to move forward. How do you modernize and still respect the city's amazing past? The Byzantine churches, the Ottoman mosques, those winding streets, the historic neighborhoods, there are no easy answers.
It's something a lot of historic cities face, but it seems especially complicated in Istanbul with all its layers of history. Are there any specific examples of this tension?
Well, think about the debates over urban development. Istanbul's population just keeps growing, so the need for housing, for infrastructure, it's intense. But some people argue that new development projects sometimes come at a cost. They destroy historic sites or green spaces.
Like those protests we talked about earlier about Gezi Park, it shows how much people care about protecting Istanbul's character, even as it changes so much.
Precisely. The Gezi Park protests in 2013 showed just how concerned people are about unchecked development, about potentially losing Istanbul's cultural and environmental heritage. It was a reminder that a city isn't just buildings and roads, it's the people, their memories, their sense of belonging.
It's about finding ways for the past and the present to exist together, to make each other richer. Do you think Istanbul is doing a good job of finding that balance?
Well, it's a work in progress, a constant negotiation. There have been some great successes, historic buildings being restored, museums and cultural centers being created, efforts to make Istanbul a destination for people interested in history and culture. But the challenges are still there. It's an ongoing discussion.
And then there's just the fact that people are living their lives every day amidst all this history. In a way, they're keeping those traditions alive, adding their own chapters to Istanbul's story.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Istanbul's story isn't just about emperors and sultans and battles and empires. It's about the everyday people who call the city home. They all contribute to its mix of cultures and experiences.
So after exploring Istanbul's history like this, what's the main takeaway? What can we learn from a city that's seen so much change?
Istanbul shows us the enduring power of place. It's a city shaped by its location, by conquests, by empires and ideas rising and falling. But it's also a city that has always reinvented itself, taking those influences and making something new and unique. It's a testament to human resilience, to our ability to adapt.
It reminds us that history isn't just something in textbooks. It's alive, happening all around us. In the cities we live in the stories we tell. Istanbul, with all its layers of history, is a perfect example of that. A constant dialogue between the past, the present, and the future.
I couldn't agree more. Maybe our listeners will think about this. If cities are really alive, what does Istanbul's story tell us about power, about culture, about resilience? And what can we, as people living in our own cities, learn from Istanbul's journey as we face the challenges of the 21st century?
That's a great question to consider. And for anyone who's ever wanted to visit Istanbul, I have one piece of advice. Go. Walk those ancient streets. See the amazing buildings. Feel the energy of the city. Let Istanbul's story come alive for you. You won't forget it.
I second that. Istanbul is a city that calls out to be explored. It's a journey of discovery. It shows how powerful the human spirit can be. And it reminds us that the past is never truly gone. It lives on in the cities we build and the stories we share.